Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Lollipop and today we're going to be comparing and contrasting two very popular entry-level mountain bikes, which are the Schwinn Axum DP and the Trek Marlin 5. Now for those of you who don't know, the Schwinn Axum is a very affordable entry-level mountain bike that you can normally get from Walmart for only $500 and some of its highlights include a 1x drivetrain, tapered head tube, and a dropper post, features that you just can't get anywhere else for this price. And the Trek Marlin 5, of course, is Trek's most popular entry-level mountain bike that you can only get from Trek authorized dealers like Trek stores and other local bike shops. Basically, in this video, I want to compare all of the main components on these two bikes to help you figure out which bike is more worth it for the money. This should also be interesting since, in my opinion, no bike from wholesale stores like Walmart has been able to compete with the quality that you get from bike shop brands like Specialized and Trek, especially since bike shops are required to build bikes to fairly high standards. However, at this price point and with these features, the Schwinn Axum is hard to ignore. Therefore, at the end of this video, I'll show these completed tables to highlight all the changes, and I also added the Trek Marlin 4 in these tables just so you can see those changes as well. And during that, I'll also give my personal thoughts on which bike is the best purchase. So let's kick off this comparison by talking about the prices. The Schwinn Axum DP is priced at $500 at Walmart, and there is a base model of this bike without the dropper post that comes in at only $450 currently. Then the Trek Marlin 5 for 2022 is priced at $720, which is definitely a much higher price point. Now there is a less expensive Trek Marlin, which is the Marlin 4, and that one costs $600, but that bike usually is not as available in Trek stores, whereas you can find the Marlin 5 more easily, so for that reason I'm choosing the Marlin 5 for this comparison. I'll also mention that these are current prices subject to change in the future. And now let's quickly talk about the colors these bikes come in. Now Schwinn doesn't have names for their colors as far as I know, but the bike comes in either this dark blue color with black accents or a red color with blue accents. The Marlin 5 comes in 4 different colors including azure, radioactive red, lithium gray, and a Volt green to Miami green fade. Alright, so for the components we gotta talk about the frames first. Both of these bikes use an aluminum frame with quick release axles in the front and rear, but the Trek Marlin comes with internal cable routing to look cleaner and protect cables. The Schwinn Axum has external routing, which doesn't look as clean, but it does make maintenance easier. However, it's worth noting that the Schwinn Axum does have the ability to internally route a dropper post in the seat tube only, while the Trek Marlin does not. And it's also worth noting that the Axum comes with a kickstand while the Marlin does not. But another frame feature we have to talk about is the head tube, which is just a straight 1.1" head tube on the Trek Marlin and on most other bikes at this price point, but the Schwinn Axum actually comes with a tapered head tube, and these are normally found on expensive mountain bikes because they make the front of the bike stronger to handle rougher riding, and they also open you up to a range of higher end suspension forks. Therefore, this feature is really nice to have and crazy to see at this $500 price point. However, another downside to the Axum is that the bike is only offered in sizes medium and large, while the Trek Marlin comes in all sizes from extra small to extra large. Besides that, let's talk about the frame geometry. I'll show the main geometry numbers on the screen for a medium frame, but basically what these mean is that the Schwinn Axum has more trail-ready geometry that will make the bike better and more stable for descending, while the Trek Marlin has more cross-country oriented geometry that is better for pedaling efficiency and speed. The next component we can talk about is the suspension fork. Schwinn does not list many of their specifications online for this bike, but based on what I do know, the Axum uses a Schwinn branded coil spring suspension fork with 28 or 30mm wide stanchions, I'm not sure which one, but 100mm of suspension fork travel and a lockout on the fork. The Marlin 5, on the other hand, uses an SR Suntour XCM30, which is still a coil spring fork that has 30mm wide stanchions, as well as a lockout and 100mm of travel in most sizes. Comparing these forks, the Marlin 5 may have a better fork if the upper stanchions are indeed wider, which would add strength over the 28mm wide stanchions, but honestly these forks are not too different. They both come with a lockout feature which allows you to turn a knob on the fork to make it fully rigid, which helps you ride faster in flat areas. But next, let's talk about the wheels. So the Schwinn bike uses 35mm wide Schwinn branded rims and pairs those to some large 2.6 inch wide tires. I can't find a brand on these tires, but they are 29 inches in diameter. The Marlin 5 uses narrower 20mm wide aluminum Bontrager connection rims paired with Bontrager XR2 comp tires that are 29 by 2.2 inches wide in most sizes. The Axum has wider rims which are thus stronger, and it also has wider tires which will provide more stability on the trail. However, this also means that the Schwinn's wheels are heavier. And now we can discuss the brake differences. Once again, I don't know the brand of the brakes on the Axum, but they are generic mechanical disc brakes with a 180mm diameter brake rotor in the front and a 160mm in the rear. The Marlin 5 uses hydraulic disc brakes instead from the brand Tektro, which provide much better stopping power, work better in all weather conditions, and require less frequent maintenance. However, the Marlin 5 only has 160mm wide brake rotors for the front and rear, and this normally means that the bike has less stopping power, but due to the hydraulic disc brakes, it will still overall have better stopping power than the Schwinn. But now finally, let's cover that dropper post. So the Schwinn Axum comes with an EXA Form branded dropper post, which is 30.9mm wide and has 125mm of travel. The Marlin 5 has a rigid aluminum seat post that is 31.6mm wide. Although the seat post on the Marlin 5 is wider and thus stronger, the dropper post on the Axum is a significant advantage since it allows you to push a lever on the handlebar to quickly drop the seat out of the way to help you move around the bike better and maintain better balance when going over rough terrain. It can also help you get on and off the bike easier since the seat is not in your way, so overall it is a great feature to have. And the last component change I'll talk about is the drivetrain as a whole. So the Schwinn Axum has a 1x8 drivetrain, which means that there is 1 gear in the front and 8 gears in the back for a total of 8 speeds. The Marlin 5 has a 2x8 drivetrain instead, so 2 gears in the front and 8 in the rear for a total of 16 speeds. I'll talk about my thoughts on these drivetrains after I discuss the parts. So for the shifters, the Axum uses one Axe branded shifter, which works well enough, but is definitely an off-brand compared to the Shimano Altus shifters on the Marlin 5, which are known to shift reliably for entry-level bikes. The Shimano shifters do have the ability to shift up to 3 gears at a time when going to an easier gear, so you can quickly change gears before climbing up a hill or something like that. For the derailleurs, which essentially move the chain to a different gear on the bike, the Axum uses an Axe branded rear derailleur that also works fine, and it has no front derailleur because it only has 1 gear in the front. The Marlin 5 uses Shimano Altus branded derailleurs in the front and the rear, which are smooth as well, but could be better for this price point. For the gears, we can start off with the front crankset. The Axum uses a generic 30-tooth crankset, while the Marlin goes to a Shimano Altus crankset with 36 teeth on the larger ring and 22 teeth on the smaller. And then paired to these cranksets, we have the rear cassettes. The Axum uses an 11 to 40 tooth cassette with 8 speeds, while the Marlin uses a Shimano Altus 12 to 32 tooth cassette. Although the Marlin 5 has a narrower gear range in the rear cassette, it still has a harder gear for going faster and an easier gear for pedaling uphill due to the 2 gears in the front. Therefore, based on this drivetrain, the Marlin 5 will be the faster bike. Now, for my drivetrain thoughts, generally for mountain biking these days, less speeds are preferred, and especially 1x drivetrains since they simplify the drivetrain and reduce weight. However, there is a downside to this, which is not having enough speeds, which could be a problem if you use the bike to commute or if you just want more incremental speeds, since on the Axum's 8-speed drivetrain you may not have all the speeds you want and might find yourself wanting an easier gear to go uphill or a harder gear to go faster. And now the last difference we can quickly go over is the weight of each bike. The Schwinn does not have an official weight, but I've seen it being weighed in at around 35 pounds. The Marlin is lighter at around 31 pounds, which makes sense based on the lighter wheels and likely a lighter frame as well. But that is it for this comparison. I'm going to give my thoughts on these bikes now and talk about which one is better. So there's no doubt that the Schwinn Axum provides an insane value for the money. It has a tapered head tube, modern frame geometry, a decent suspension fork for the price, wide rims and tires for stability, disc brakes, a dropper post, which is unheard of at this price point, and a 1x drivetrain. It really ticks off a lot of boxes. I think the main downsides with this bike are just going to be the brakes not being as strong, the amount of speeds being a little low, and the bike weighing around 35 pounds. But for $500, that's nitpicking. The Trek Marlin 5 definitely has advantages like the hydraulic disc brakes and a reliable drivetrain, as well as the quality of Trek bikes and the fact that the bike is professionally built by a bike shop. However, in my opinion, if you get the Schwinn Axum and spend some extra money to upgrade some of the components on it, like the brakes, you would still save money over the Marlin 5 and have a really good bike. But I did include the Marlin 4 in this comparison as well, and it's a tougher decision when you compare that bike since it is more similar to the Axum, with a similar suspension fork and brakes, but the Marlin 4 has a lot of unnecessary speeds for mountain biking, which makes it a bit cluttered in my opinion. Everyone has their own preferences, and of course you guys know I love Trek bikes, but it's just hard for any brand to compete with a $500 bike that has this many nice features, and especially a good frame. I'm excited to hear what you all think in the comments below, so definitely let me know which bike you choose, but besides that, thank you so much for watching, and remember to keep biking.